Are you ready for this?
I've been born ready for this.
All right, welcome to another episode of Techsplanation. This is the airplane mode, so if you're watching this, well, hopefully you're watching it on a plane and not in a car. That could get dangerous. That wouldn't be good. See, there's the one. All right, hey, listen, today on our show, I got a good guest with me, a fun guest. I'm really excited for today's guest. I've got Jeremy Morris from Vizrt here to talk about some automations and macros.
Hi, Dr. Nick. I've always wanted to do that to you.
Awesome. Is it because of my Simpsons character? You know, I have an avatar.
Yes, I know. That always cracked me up the first time I saw that. So, which should make the NAB show that much more fun taking pictures with you. So I expect a whole lot of fun with that.
I'm kind of thinking about just having some like pop-ups made in different poses where people can just go stand next to it. And
we need and make them life size, so they're like 6'7".
Oh, that'd be wait. Okay, I'll take 6'7". Yeah, it's awesome. It's only about 3 feet taller than I really am. Yeah, I told somebody today they were complaining about how I'm distracting. I said it's not that I'm distracting. I said I'm so short and I'm so bald. It's the shine off my head blinds everybody. You know, it's my fault. It's my fault. Oh, I should have eaten more protein as a kid. Anyways, Jeremy, I almost said Jeremy from New Tech, but we can't say that anymore.
I'll still allow it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I'll allow it. Yeah, because again, our stuff still has the New Tech branding on some products for now, as we move over to the full Vizrt portfolio and platform. But yes, even our social media says New Tech now Vizrt. So the transition's there. Yeah.
I think from now on we should introduce you guys as New Tech now Vizrt. I mean, just as one word, and that should be like the statement always. Okay, Jeremy from New Tech now Vizrt. All right, no, listen. So I want to chat today. The reason I asked you to come on the show is because a lot of times our dealers are buying TriCasters and slapping them in, and then we're training people how to you push this button, then you push that button. And in so many environments, there are ways to automate the utilization of a TriCaster, right? To create a just easier experience. Because if you think about it, there are some activities a TriCaster could do. You ever watch Naruto, and there's that thing he does where he has like 7 clones of him to create this power move he does. Well, it would take like 7 me's to pull off some of the things that Jordan does with one macro here in the TriCaster. And so that's what we want to talk about is automation, third-party automations, macros, all the ways you could use a TriCaster without touching the TriCaster. Is that about right? Is that fair?
Oh, yeah.
Good?
There's a lot of that. I do that every single day here for my studio. All my TriCasters are in different locations inside this small little box that I'm in. But I'm doing everything remotely from my desktop. But that's kind of the nature of how our products have been built for so many years. Having that internal NDI KVM to start with, then you start adding in all the other different ways for control, not just from control surfaces, but keyboard and mouse. Our products have been shipping with keyboard and mouse forever and a day. Why? Because that's the basic of operation. Then you scale up, add different parts and pieces as you will, depending on what your workflow is and frankly, your budget. And real estate, you may not have space to have a full control surface. Like at my desk, I can't put my 2-stripe. I can put a flex, but my 2-stripe's over there. So how am I going to operate the TriCaster effectively? What's the best way to accommodate that? And that's just out of the box right there with our Vizrt products. Now, how do you expand upon that? Well, we introduced Live Panel a few years ago inside the Premium Access version, and then also on the TC2 and the TC1 Pro, the browser-based application. Yeah.
Before we go down that path, yeah. So let's just break down some of. No, it happens. Don't feel bad. I'm just as horrible. So let's break down a couple. Jordan, if we go to slide number 2. Let's just talk about the different TriCasters that are available. And some of these apply to all of them. Some apply to some of them. But so just out of the gate, the Mini, SDI, and HDMI. No, we did put it. So this is standard. This is really an older unit. I don't think there's any of these. Are we still selling these? I thought this was. All right, there's still some out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is traditional Mini with actual physical inputs. And you've got the Mini X and the Mini, which is HDMI.
Yes, there's 4 HDMI inputs on the Mini X.
the Mini 4K, which is what I use here, which is no inputs, all NDI.
That's how you see me.
And
Is going through my
perfect.
Mini 4K. Yeah.
And then talk to me about the Mini Go, because that's a new entrant on this platform.
So the Mini Go is a very interesting product that I've been kind of pushing for a while. It's more on the entry level side, even further down from the Mini X and the Mini 4K, where you're getting 4 inputs that are NDI or USB. So now we've added USB connectivity to the front. So for small podcasters, for a lot of K-12, some corporate fly packs, this becomes a very interesting product because a lot of opportunities that we've had, they don't need 8 inputs. They're only talking 1 or 2 cameras at most, plus a presentation source. So this simplifies that even further from an operator and input perspective, and at a much lower price point. So the Mini Go is a very attractive product in that world, and it's also our first Mini that's branded Vizrt. So you'll actually see the orange logo and things like that on the box. But yeah, it's a great way to start from an entry-level USB or NDI, 4 inputs, and then you get the capability of scaling up. So we can talk about that too, on how that's capable down the road.
Well, and and I kind of balked at the USB at first, but I thought about it. I mean, that is a really affordable way to start with a bunch of webcams, right? I mean, you may not get the quality of some of the better cameras out there, but it's certainly a way to start producing right away.
Well, especially
out of the gate.
if you don't need PTZs, if you just need static shots, most of that's going to be USB anyway. So then you have a lower cost of entry in your entire production, not just from the TriCaster perspective, but other parts and pieces that you need. But guess what? You can grow into the box. And then now you can add features and then trade it in later, because we'll still have that trading capability to move up the line.
So the next one is the 410. And just so the audience knows, the reason we want to kind of show you everything is because there's different ways to get in the door. So we're hoping that maybe you get triggered in an idea of, hey, we could build this new conference center with a TriCaster Mini using these APIs, or put this other thing in, in a church. So, so I want to kind of show you the different solutions and the sizes of these, because they do scale. Now, the 410 though is one of those I kind of feel like it's in the middle. It's the first of the rack mount. But it's still limited to 4 physical inputs, even though it goes beyond that. So it kind of sits in between the sort of the big boys versions and the small boys versions. And then as we move out of the 410, we get into the bigger ones. These are the pure rack mount versions, the pro versions that have a lot more inputs on them. So the TC1, the TC1 Pro, and the TC2 Elite, which goes up to 16 inputs, 32 inputs?
32 on the 2 Elite, 16 on the 1 and 1 Pro.
Yep.
And
so
now we can also talk about on the cloud side, once we get to that, the TriCaster Now, and then also the TriCaster Vector Plus, which is 44 inputs.
Incredible. How many? So on the cloud, how many inputs are we going to be available to us?
So when it gets released, it'll be 8 inputs to start, and then there is a possibility of having a version that'll have 16 inputs. But right now, yeah, that's the slow roll as we're working in the TriCaster Now version. So, which is a very cool product. We've been showing it in limited capacities and a lot of different demos, a lot of different shows, IBC, NAB New York, things like that. We got a lot of interest for it, and I think it'll definitely turn some heads once we're ready to go to market with it.
Nice. Okay, so let's get into the question of the day, which is, how important is automation? You first.
Automation is incredibly important. The TriCaster for the longest time has been designed as a one-man band operation. However, as technology has changed, as workflows changed, one person, yes, can still run it, but now there's a whole lot of other things to deal with graphics, with audio, with Live Call Connect, which is our integration with VMR applications, the virtual meeting rooms. So now you're doing a whole lot than just regular switching a show. So how do you do that effectively when you're limited to staff? Well, we've had a strong macro engine internally for many, many years. Now we're exposing that in a lot of nice and creative ways with the different automation capabilities, not just switching a show and bringing in a lower third, but bringing in animations, controlling other macros, doing DDR control, audio, fade in, fade out. So there's so many different things we're able to accomplish inside of our macro engine. Then we can take it to the next level, the fact that we're a network-based device, and with our strong API, now we can talk to third-party control. And this is something we've been doing for a couple years, but now it's really taken off with our dealers, integrators, and even consultants are liking the capability.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. And as the slide on screen shows, here's why. It's that oftentimes things get super complex, And we need a better way to simplify that complexity so that it can just be done with a single button press, timing, everything. But also we get into environments where it's not, like we talk about city council and house of worship. It's not always the most well-trained staff, or oftentimes like in city council and some of these government venues, it's not a trained staff at all, right? It's a clerk who's really trying to maintain order running the event. And so if we can simplify the experience through automation.
With that, we actually have our chamber app. That's what it was designed for, is when you don't have a traditional TD or video production operator, you're talking about a clerk, you're talking about a volunteer, even interns sometimes are running these meetings. And so the chamber app is just a large touch monitor that is controlling everything on the back end. And to the operator, you're just hitting the button, I want this camera, and that camera is going to go to that council member, is going to bring up that audio and that graphic. So all that automation behind the scenes is being controlled from the chamber app, which is very slick.
So let's get into how some of the macros work. So if somebody doesn't know what a macro is, let's just explain it, in as easy, simple terms. Jeremy, what is a macro?
A macro is a command of the system that's simplified to an operation. So whatever the TriCaster is capable of doing, I can create a macro to do all those different steps in a simplified, nice, and fluid motion. So that could be switching multiple cameras and then time that out to where I've got a camera that switches on air and it brings on a lower third at a timed event, or show open. I run the clip out of the DDR. Once the DDR is over with, it switches to a camera, brings on that lower third, or switches to an over-the-shoulder bug, things like that. So that macro is more than just a simple, API or GPU command. This is a defined path of operation inside the system. So it's very, very powerful.
Yeah, I always think about it as something that would take me 5 minutes to do could be done in a single button press, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, very quick. So different ways that we can trigger macros, keyboard shortcuts, control surfaces, MIDI controllers. We had a little talk about that one pre-show, that MIDI does require some external support. GPI controllers. These are all interfaces within the TriCaster to allow us to trigger those macros. And then going down further, things that macros can do. So it tells us what state the switcher is in, what's happening with it right now, what is it currently doing. Media player macros, so being able to move content on and off screen or change content. Hotspot's a great one. Talk about hotspots, because I think that's sort of foreign to anybody but a TriCaster user.
Hotspots, I want to revive that, because that was a killer demo back in the day that I would do on an 8000. Hotspots kind of came about years ago when we had a lot of small market TV stations that were doing a lot from the weather perspective, where you're standing in front of the green screen and you're doing a lot of motion. Well, this allowed us to now take advantage of different keying layers inside the TriCaster to now change effects. So what the hotspot basically is a keying, it's an alpha channel on the video. And as you move through that defined box, that region on the screen, now the operator sees it, the talent doesn't really notice. So we would take green tape and put it on the green wall so you can physically see it. And once you move over that tape on the wall, it'll actually make an effect. And a lot of people won't even notice inside the demo content that comes on the TriCaster. There's actually videos of Kiki doing some stuff. And that's what that's for, is for the hotspot triggers. And so you can actually walk through and see how that behaves. And so, so your mannerisms on camera, like I move my hands a lot. So I could have different areas over the screen. As I move my hand through that area, I could trigger a lower third. I could play a DDR clip. I could switch a camera angle if I want to. There was a radio station years ago that it didn't have enough room for an operator to control the TriCaster, but on the desk in front of the talent, there were Post-it notes. And so an overhead camera was over him. So as he would put his hand over those Post-it notes, that would switch the camera angle. So based on the hotspot. So there's some really cool applications. Hotspots kind of hasn't been talked about in a long time. So thank you for taking me down the memory lane to talk about it, because it was always fun to show off.
You mentioned Kiki stock hammer, so now I'm going to have to go watch Star Trek tonight. That's fair. Okay, so other things that we could tie into: audio automation. So, being able to look at levels and perform tasks based on the level, the audio that's happening. Live panel is a really important one. And Jordan, I don't know if we have access to it where we're at right now, but live panel is a full web UI for triggering macros, doing core cuts and really just running your TriCaster, natively right off of a web UI. And it works on virtually any web-enabled device.
Yeah, I'm a huge
Last
fan of
one.
Live Panel.
Yeah, no, I'm get. It is highly useful for a guy who runs a TriCaster by himself.
Yes.
Because mine's hiding back there. And so it's far away from me. So having Live Panel right in front of me is great.
Well, that also goes back to the previous conversation when it comes to council members or other things where you don't have a highly trained staff. You can simplify the user interface. Most people know how to work an iPad. So they bring up that browser. I select that camera. I hit start record. That's all they need to do. They don't need to know everything that's going on behind the scenes from the regular TriCaster interface.
It also keeps you from maybe having to buy a third-party control system or program, which we're going to get into third-party control in a little bit. And then the last one is NDI control. So utilizing NDI KVM and other NDI-enabled devices to, kind of control the overall resource. All right. Moving out to Live Story Creator. Okay, so this is one I think that gets, like Hotspots, kind of gets left behind a little bit and gets forgotten about. Talk us through Live Story Creator.
The Live Story Creator was another one of those feature sets that was added to the Premium Access package several years ago. That's now part of standard feature sets on the TC1 Pro and the TriCaster 2 Elite, where basically I have an internal teleprompter. And for a lot of people, like, oh, yeah, that's cool. I have a teleprompter. What can I use that for? Okay, well, just standard teleprompting. Yes, I can take that, turn that to an NDI output. So now I can follow that along from a lot of other devices. In fact, there are some teleprompting companies that now have an NDI input on their monitors, on their sleds and everything for camera housing. So now they can take that direct NDI feed to feed that teleprompter. But what we can able to do from a macro perspective is I can use, it's basically just a Word doc, but I can use headings feature inside Word to call out macros that I've created. So as the script gets read, it can actually automate those macros line by line. So now you actually have a triggering mechanism. So I don't have to worry about, okay, I don't, back in the day, you had the back time. So at 7 seconds as they read the script, now I start to pre-roll the tape. Now that becomes an automated procedure. As the script is being read, now that DDR clip starts playing with that over the shoulder in time with the script. So there's no mishits anymore. We also have that capability. There was a church during COVID, I believe it was out in California, as they were doing their devotionals, as the pastor was reading through the lines of scripture, that was now automating across the screen at the lower third because it matched up when he read it. So there wasn't someone's like, I have to advance each slide each time they get to that point. No, it would do it and would catch up with him. So there's a lot of cool things that we can do with that inside Live Story Creator. It's just a teleprompter script, but now I have macro control as well. So it's a very, very powerful tool.
Love it. That is one that I think more people should learn to exploit. Okay, so before we go into the next two, I want to kind of connect, that while TCP and these other protocols exist, this is where really third-party automation comes into play, right? Where we really start to toy with, utilizing external systems. So a lot of times we talk about city councils or conference centers or areas where you would have Crestron, QSys, Extron, all these control systems that are designed to run cameras and other systems. Those can also control the TriCaster. They can fire off macros, and I think this is really important because when some of our dealers are looking at how to integrate, they need to think about the TriCaster as another appliance that is controllable inside the environment. That it's a switcher just like a Matrix from any of those other companies, just does a lot more than most of those other products can do. So these next two protocols, specifically TCP/IP, which is a web protocol, and then the one following HTTP, these are pure web commands. These are shot across the network. They're injected through the Ethernet port, but all the commands of a TriCaster have the ability to be done via these two protocols, meaning a Crestron system can call a macro, can pull a switch, can add a graphic, can take away a graphic. So we can now create interfaces or tie those into interfaces where a customer might already be, right? So a customer might be at a conference room table doing a live Teams production, but via Live Call Connect, but have control of their TriCaster from the same Crestron interface that they're using to control the rest of the room. Do you see people tying into this and starting to utilize this more?
Oh, yeah. I've been pushing this for a while now, especially dealing with a lot of the consultants that I talk to now. They're starting to spec this in to the overall system where you have that merging of technology. You had the AV path and you had the broadcast path, and a lot of times those two worlds never could meet. Well, now that everything's living on a network of some sort, now we have that capability of having, the Crestron control network or the QSys network or the Extron network can actually talk to the TriCaster network because we have the multiple NIC capability. So if I have, my regular house network, my NDI network, I can add a USB-C to RJ45 dongle and create a third network that talks to the control LAN. So now I have that capability of sending commands back and forth, and it's not just one-way traffic. I can send commands to QSys as they can recall presets back from me. So there's a lot of cool things that we can do in that network layer because a lot of us are now speaking similar languages, maybe not exactly the same, but you're doing the API commands over HTTP or the TCP/IP socket layer. So we can open up ports, we can send those commands, we can talk to it. And so we can really rely on our professional services team to create some of these really cool workflows. I mean, that's how we got the commands from Crestron and whatnot. I take those command lines, I can put those into a macro. So when I fire off that macro, then that can send that command over to that system. So that's a very cool workflow that I'm tying in products together.
You just so we've been talking about how to control the TriCaster. What you just illustrated there was utilizing the TriCaster to return commands back to the other platform. So basically, use the TriCaster to control Crestron.
Yeah, I do it. I've got a QSys Core 110 here that I send commands to it to play back media players. That's how I do my Dante audio demos and things of that nature. But yeah, there's tons of other things that we can do. I mean, we've had for the longest time going back to the TriCaster 8000 where I had router control. We deal with the Grass Valley protocol. So now over a network, I can control an AJA or a Blackmagic or Evertz, whoever's device that I want to talk to in the broadcast world as well. So I'm controlling router cross points from the TriCaster. I can also talk to an AV matrix. So I really can blend a whole lot of worlds together and then simplify that operation. I'm not talking, hey, I have to switch here in the control surface. I have to switch here in the router panel. I have to go over here to the touch panel for audio control. I can now unify that in one system.
Awesome. Hey, listen, I want to touch on one last point that you brought up briefly there, which was professional services. So a lot of times customers might have a great idea in mind of something they want to do. They pitch that to the dealer and maybe the dealer has the expertise, maybe they don't, but you guys have a team that can sort of cross that last mile, right? Kind of finish these out and customize these APIs for the customers. Talk just a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah, those are our true wizards of smart. Those guys spend a whole lot of time investigating the capabilities, and that a lot of that's up front where there's a statement of work, there's a process. Hey, I have this box and I need to talk to the TriCaster. Can it happen first off? So they'll investigate to say, okay, yeah, we can kind of make this dance. Then they'll set up, okay, here's how much of time will be required to pull this off. And so that's kind of why professional services is sold as blocks of hours, because it might require a whole lot up front and then maybe a little bit of back end tweaking at the end once the project is finished. Or you have that bank of hours. Yes, I can do a whole lot up front. Then I bank a few of those hours for afterwards when I want to change that workflow. The client may have a different solution or a different scenario that'll come up once the system's already been in place for a little while. So that's a great way to then utilize direct factory people to have the deep knowledge of how these systems can work together. And so that's where we come up with a whole lot of cool stuff and a lot of cool workflows that a lot of people just hadn't thought of before, just because our guys took the time and the effort to say, hey, yeah, it's sitting on the same network. These commands are available. Let's make them dance.
Awesome. Well, listen, Jeremy, I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you so much for being on. If you've got more questions out there on how to automate your TriCaster, or if you're just looking to see where you could plug a TriCaster into your system, reach out to anybody here at JB&A or talk to Jeremy Morris, who's also going to be playing Santa Claus on weekends for Christmas.
Yeah, I asked my wife, so just go ahead and just dye it all gray. And she was like, yeah, no.
Now I'm supposed to keep a little of the old Jeremy around. Come on. All right. Hey, listen, great having you on the show. Appreciate that, everybody. Join us for another episode of Techsplanation coming to a theater near you. Talk soon.